Hi everybody. It's Saturday afternoon and I've made a bit of a day trip out to the main line of Philadelphia. I'm in Villanova, which is a town on the main line, the main line was a railroad. Initially it was actually a railroad and canal line. Oh, you can hear the trains going through. It was a combination of a railroad and canal line that connected Philadelphia all the way to Pittsburgh. It was a very early rail line, and eventually it became part of the Pennsylvania Railroad, and the line that extended out from Philadelphia into the suburbs was called the Main Line. And I don't know if you've ever seen that story, the movie The Philadelphia Story with Katharine Hepburn, but that's sort of the main line is these big estates, right? And the men would commute into town for their various jobs, on the trains. And actually, when I first moved to the area in the mid-90s, we lived in Marion Station, and we lived right opposite the train station there. It was very quaint, in an apartment, and we ended up, the way you do crazy things when you're in your 20s, we bought a live Christmas tree with a root ball on the third floor apartment, and we ended up getting it planted in the Marion train station. So we called it Bruce the Spruce, and maybe it's still there. So I came out today. I was in the area, and I was thinking, I wanted to get out of nature. It's a beautiful day, and I came across this place called Stoneleigh. Stoneleigh is adjacent to the Villanova campus, Villanova University. And one of the reasons I wanted I'm going to do a second visit a bit further down the line, which is the site of the B Lab, the place where the benefit corporations that are the new kind of stakeholder capitalist corporation structuring was set up in 2009-ish or so, 2006 maybe. But before I went there, I wanted to get some natural things to take along to make my little heart. And then I realized that the Natural Lands Trust has secured this property here, Stoneleigh. It's an estate. It's a little over 40 acres here in Villanova, just adjacent to the campus, that was originally built in the 1870s for a railroad executive, an executive with the Pennsylvania Railroad. And then in the 1930s, it was acquired by the Haas family, and that's H-A-A-S. And Otto Haas he came to Philadelphia from Germany. I think Haas is evidently the word for rabbit in Dutch, but he was coming from Germany, and he was in tanning, and eventually ended up building a major specialty chemical company later called Rohm and Haas, R-O-H-M, and Haas, H-A-A-S. And it was a very, very profitable chemical company. And one of their main areas of growth was during World War II, and they had developed plexiglass, what became plexiglass. So knowing the crazy amounts of plexiglass that have been erected during the lockdowns or what have you over the last few years, it's interesting to imagine that this fortune here of this estate was made basically on World War II plexiglass used in airplanes. But very, very connected in terms of the defense contracting space. And in fact, in the 1960s, the new headquarters for Rohm and Haas was relocated from Washington Square right up next to Independence Hall, right on Independence Mall overlooking it. It was a giant building, and that was in the 1960s. And so that was Rohm and Haas. So yeah, anyway, so they went down to Independence Hall. And so it's interesting, you've got all of these historic buildings, but then there's also the Chemical Heritage Center and Rohm and Haas that's right in the middle of our Liberty Bell area, which is kind of interesting to look at on the map. So the other thing about the Haas family is they were very affluent, and they ended up, Otto and his wife had a number of children, John and Cara, C-H-A-R-A, Haas, took over the estate from their family in the 1960s, and they had 5 children. And there's actually kind of a crazy statue that's right at the gate out front, just inside the gate, that was a replica of a statue that they had made that was carved out of a tree. The reproduction was made out of a white oak tree, a 22,000 pound section of white oak that was carved with rabbits on it. So it has like this little spirally spiral that goes up to the top, and then there's the parent rabbits and then 5 children rabbits. And so that's quite interesting to me that they have this rabbit sculpture because rabbits have a fair amount of symbolism too down the rabbit hole, so to speak. And the family is very philanthropic. They have a lot of money, and they ended up creating something called the William Penn Foundation. Now, I don't believe that the Haases were Quaker. Maybe they just called it the Penn Foundation because of Pennsylvania or the Pennsylvania Railroad. But the William Penn Foundation is pretty much the major foundation, or one of the major ones in Philadelphia. And they were heavily involved in the education space when I started to do my work in education. And in fact, they teamed up with Boston Consulting Group and to develop a report to essentially set the Philadelphia public schools up for privatization. And they ultimately got called on it, and there were a number of ethics investigations on the nature of what was actually lobbying by the William Penn Foundation and through Boston Consulting Group to inappropriately influence education policy in the city of Philadelphia. But that was sort of my entry into all of this, was through the schools and through this school closure that happened through Boston Consulting Group. So it's interesting to sort of draw the line back to the Haas family and to this estate. And I ended up, I'm making, I'll show you in a bit, but I made one of my little intentions that I set behind me in the mulch. So, so the Haas family, the William Penn Foundation, very influential in everything that is going to be coming with impact finance. And I don't think I really realized how close this estate was to Berwyn, where the B Lab area is set up. And the B Lab, they're the institution that was set up, largely funded by Rockefeller, to create the rules and the metrics of the game of data-driven human capital finance and the privatization of all of the social welfare systems in the name of accountability and transparency and impact and the sustainable development goals. So it's just a hop, skip, and a jump. The other thing I wanted to mention about this location, in that it's close to Villanova, is that a year or so ago, I was watching an event about Teilhard de Chardin. And he was the Jesuit priest who was an anthropologist in China and was part of the group that discovered the Peking man. And in the 1930s, they came in and they awarded Teilhard de Chardin, Villanova, their Mendel Prize for his accomplishment in the Peking man. And so that was part of it. And so Teilhard de Chardin, he was the guy who, with Vernadsky, thought about this idea of the noosphere. Eventually we were going to converge to some point of like collective intelligence, this idea, this layer of ideas that existed in the atmosphere, and that we were all going to converge at this omega point. That was part of what he talked about. And he called it Christogenesis. And that was his focus, was that this coming thing would happen. And there was a woman named Ilia Delio, I-L-I-A, I believe, D-E-L-I-O, and she is affiliated with Villanova. I think she's actually based out of DC, but she has an appointment here at Villanova, and she runs this Christogenesis Center. And so, I keep talking about the ways in which faith institutions are participating in this, because through the data-driven impact and the social welfare services and the ways in which the faith communities are going to be administering these services to people in need and traumatized people and refugee people and children, they're going to be generating the data that is going to be moving us towards the singularity through these cognitive models, through the modeling. And so I think that's really interesting too, the idea of data, and then the idea of Christogenesis, and then the impact finance crowd that are creating the policy and mechanical infrastructure to make that happen. They're funding it, and all for the name of good, right? Just like William Penn, the Quaker, it's all for your own good, that we become part of this mechanical collective, I guess. And so yesterday I was doing a live where I was reading from this book called Physics as Metaphor, and it was really talking about different conceptualizations of space and time and physics from more of a metaphysical standpoint, and sort of revisiting the fact that, you know, for thousands and thousands of years, people had different ways of looking at the world that were very different from the Enlightenment thinkers. And in the Middle Ages and in indigenous cultures, their concept of space is not something that's sort of vacant and structured and empty and mathematical, but that is something that, and that you are separate from, and that space individuates you from other things and other people. But back in this other way of looking at it was more like space was emergent with potential and meaning and symbolism and connectivity and influence and reciprocity. And so that there was a lot of emergence there, right? There was a lot of, in some ways it was not in any way diminishing the challenges of the Middle Ages or gathering societies and that sort of thing. But that you had meaning, like you knew where you belonged. You belonged in the world and the world belonged with you, and there was communication. And so I've been talking to Cliff a little bit about this idea of my heart and, you know, trying to come up with a playbook because, you know, I'm not part of the battalion, we don't have, you know, tens of thousands of people now talking about the concerns about blockchain identity and impact finance and hive mind consciousness yet. They're talking about it, but not in those ways. So I'm going to come out and I'm going to try to talk to life. I'm going to talk to, as he said, it's sort of like putting these intentions that I put out are ways to draw attention to things that maybe need rebalanced. And so this landscape that I'm in this 40-acre landscape that's preserved, that's quite beautiful. It was designed in part by the Olmsted Brothers landscape architecture firm. I think they were here for 50 years. And it's, you know, part of what landscape architecture does is it creates a domesticated landscape that's really glorious. But it's rambly, the Olmsted approach. It's not necessarily long geometric gardens, display gardens. It's supposed to look natural. It's supposed to look serendipitous. It's supposed to be playful and fun. And, but it's designed. And, you know, that's one of the things working at Bartram's Garden, you know, and I wasn't a gardener, but when I first got there, I thought, oh, this is a bit messy. Like, you know, maybe you should deadhead some of these flowers or whatever. And what I didn't appreciate about Bartram's, which is very different from other landscapes, is it was about the entire life cycle of the plant and seed saving and that. It wasn't meant for display. And so these spaces are designed, and again, it just simply reinforces the tremendous inequalities that we have in this world, that some people have like more. And even this now, I mean, it's for the public, it's Natural Lands Trust administers it, but you have to be able to get all the way out here. It's about 45 minutes outside the city. That's something a lot of people who are working multiple jobs and don't have good transportation can't get out here. So some people get really nice things and they get more things than other people do. And having philanthropies that set up public benefit corporations that are going to manage people as data assets doesn't fix any of that. It doesn't. And so this sleight of hand here that to me that this landscape represents, the sleight of hand that it looks natural, but it's not, right? It's actually quite domesticated and civilized. And so that is what is coming. That is what is coming with the Fourth Industrial Revolution, with Globalization 4.0, with the next set of things. And last night, someone in the comments had drawn my attention to an hour-long talk that the Hoover Institute gave back in August on synthetic biology and democracy. And the Hoover Institute is at Stanford. And, you know, essentially they were just talking in a really straightforward way about this future of designing cells by 2050, by overcoming atoms with bits, by disentangling from global supply chains, by essentially creating machines like 3D printers or bioreactors that would just create out of molecules random stuff. Almost like a teleporter, right? Like you just code in with CAD what you want and poof, it shows up. But, you know, they were talking about coming up with, you know, salmonella and remaking the salmonella as medicine or you know, teaching kids to have, restructure biology so that your nose is a constant nanosensor for disease, and just a really mechanical view of the world, and not an integrated view of the world, not a beautiful, like, emergent view of the world. It's just in engineering, a techne, right? The techne version. And that's what data is. Data driven, everything is just going to be a techne version of everything, with no magic, with no imagination, with, nothing that's not coded into the system, and they're going to tell us it's peaceful and safe and homogenous, and we should just get over it, because this is what we have to have, or the world's going to end. The world's going to end if we don't, turn everything over to the technicians. So I'm not with that. I think we have a lot more potential than living inside the machine. But I think it's interesting that along the main line and all of these railroad corridors, eventually there were also telegraph lines. And so the idea of space and information and time, how it changes with how we have access to information. So like these folks at Hoover Institute in Stanford were imagining, like, oh, now everything is information, right? And we're going to call it biological solutions. Everything is just molecules. So that means it's biology, right? It's just biological molecules. You can just mix and match and make whatever you want, like make whatever hybrid thing you want. And we'll call it organic, or we'll call it sustainable. We'll call it all these things, it's not going to be like the bad chemical companies back in the day, right? It's going to be wonderful because it's organic, because it's molecules, like that's supposed to make us feel better about these bioreactors, sludge, printing materials. Like, I don't think so. But the transmission of information also came on the telegraph, so that came with the railroads. And so we're situated here, like, how do you imagine information? How do you interact with information? Are you interacting with bits? Or are you interacting with atoms? How fast is it interacting? And like within this, one of the people who was involved in the telegraph lines with the Pennsylvania Railroad was Andrew Carnegie, who grew up in the Swedenborgian Church, and I guess worked in a cotton mill in Pittsburgh, and then taught himself telegraph work and went to go work for, I think, Tom Scott, who was with the Pennsylvania Railroad, and then became tapped as the head of the War Department by Lincoln. And so Carnegie followed him to Washington, and it was all about information and how your world changes when the speed of information and the amount of information shifts, right? The telegraph changed all that. The railroads changed the speed, it changed time, it changed our perceptions, it changed our imaginings with the world. So then we didn't just imagine that we were interacting with our small world, our village, some the things that were maybe a day's wagon ride away. Like we've got railroads, we can do all these things, and now we've got 3D, we've got VR, and we can live in a simulation. But that simulation is all geometry, it's all math, it's all cold. It's not this. It's not. There's a beautiful fungus that I found on my way in today in the mulch. So I picked up this beautiful paired fungus and some rosebuds and a beautiful dandelion. I came here, this is very fancy, beautiful trees. I mean, I love it. It's very nice to look at. But whenever I see the dandelions, I'm like, yeah, dude, you're my friends. Hey there, And so I have a dandelion in there, and some quartz rocks that I got from the creek near Vanguard, and a lot of ginkgo, because time, right? So ancient. So I'm going to make this intention old with my ginkgo leaves, and rose hips. And the rose hips were from the gardens in front of Eastern State Penitentiary, the first panopticon that's in my neighborhood. And they were just this gift. The world offers you the gift. It offers you things. And, I appreciate the time to try to get away from, like, even though these are atoms that bought things, right? Like the world offers you beauty, and then you can just pick it up and you can arrange it, but not like I'm going to go into CAD and make some muckety muck with molecules and then print it out on a printer machine. I'm just going to go in the world and use my imagination and find beautiful things. So yeah, so we have some oak leaves and asters, wood asters, and I don't know, some yellowy blades of grass, which were fun. And the edging of this, which isn't super obvious, but it's curled up rhododendron leaves. And they all curled up like those little curly cookies, which is kind of neat. And then yellow pine needles. And I felt kind of bad for this pine tree that it was dropping its needles in a sort of a sad way. But I picked some of them up, and they're just a pop of color against the ginkgo. So I'm going to take a moment and show you it up close, and then the next stop is going to be over at B Lab, where they set up the infrastructure for these stakeholder capitalist, good corporation, good capitalism metrics for the metaverse and impact tokens to create the singularity. So I'm just going to take a minute with my beauty bowl. Rebalance things that have been out of balance for a long time, since the railroad, since the telegraph, since the plexiglass, since the impact finance, since the school closures. Many things need to be rebalanced. All right, so this is my little offering. You can see the setting. It's a beautiful day. They're not spraying today. They were spraying so much when I was at Bartram's garden the other day. It was terrible. You can see the beautiful lawns and trees, and there's a big house beyond there. I'll insert a couple of pictures of the house so you can see it, but quite lovely. And then this tree, I put it under here because it just seemed, this tree, the leaves are all gone, but maybe this tree has had its time. So I left the offering under this tree. A portal, a communication, an alternate communication system. So you can see its attributes. So I have at the bottom some red beautiful oak and wood aster and a walnut. There's the little walnut and aster. And then these are the little rocks that I had from the creek by the Vanguard Corporate Office Center. And then some fern, some fronds of the fern sort of on either side. And then in the middle, you can see the fungus that was in the mulch today, and the rosebud and some grass seed and some little dandelions for us. Always good with the dandelions. And rose hips, two kinds. These are from the pergola here, and then these amazing kinds from Eastern State Penitentiary. Beautiful pop of color against the ginkgo leaves. And these are just some little, I think, gaillardia from a planter bed. Oh, and I put this on some dandelion leaves so you can see there's like rosettes. Oh, and the rock here is from the wall at the end of my block, which was part of the Drexel Hospital. And so Drexel, this was the Catholic Drexel, who was a saint, I think Catherine Drexel. But also in her family was Anthony Drexel, who was J.P. Morgan's advisor. And so there was a bit of wissik and schist that was just laying in the sidewalk, looking like it was waiting for someone to use it to crack open a car window. So I picked it up and I brought it out here. So sort of a little amelioration of the trading paper finance crowd. And then we have, this is some sort of nut. And I got this at the garden last week, and it looks like a lime, but I know it's not a lime, but it's quite an extravagant color with these the little petals that went around it, and now it's opening. And then I'm always planting acorns. So this is on a bit of a red bud leaf that was in the shape of a heart, which I liked. And I made a little bed with some of the rocks and some yellow oak. And then whooshing out the energy with the greeny yellow, I think these are just weeds in the grass, but I like it. It's sort of like a little crown. All right. So I stepped on my string or whatever, and I messed it up, and clearly my lighting is not great either, but I'm just gonna walk my way out, and so I'm just gonna leave the camera on so you can kind of walk with me and see what it looks like, and then we'll do another video when I get to the B Lab down the way at Berwyn. I think they want you to stay on the sidewalks, but I'm not so great at staying on the sidewalks. The trees are glorious. They have a whole guide to the trees here. You can see it's supposed to look very natural. That's the meadow, but it is still very, very managed. You have to kind of wonder about you must have a nice endowment to keep it looking so nice. And again, I think about, all the folks in Philadelphia, and that's That's the thing that's so hard about this, is that there's so much inequality. Some people have so many beautiful things, and so many people don't. And that's what we have to try to figure out how to fix, is that piece. Because they want to redistribute it with tokens. They want to sort of tell us the way forward is going to come through us all having tokens. Oh, this is amazing. I forgot to say this. Just a second. All right, so I've walked up the trail a little bit. You can see sort of this house, this estate. When I talk about the Philadelphia story, these estates, this is the kind of place, what it looks like. You know, again, this is part of a natural lands trust site. And so the thing I forgot to say, because I always have all these things going through my head when I'm walking around, and then I don't remember to say them all. But so I was in this grove of evergreens, and it was opening up to the meadow, and I saw in the mid distance, I'm pretty sure it was a fox. And I've only seen foxes in the distance, not close. And this was maybe 30 feet away, and it was not timid. It was almost tame. I mean, and it was prancing, it was jumping in this beautiful way, just popping up and jumping. And I've seen a few in the city parks, and honestly, they get mange and they don't often look healthy. But this one had the best energy. It was just like a gift. And I just stood there and I just said, thank you, thank you, thank you. And then coming around again, I saw the same fox, and it was so close. And I think I'll include some footage of it so that you can see it too. But then I was like, maybe it was somebody's dog that looks like a fox, and maybe it wasn't really a fox, and it had a bit of a white tip on its tail. And so I like white tail on fox, and they're like, oh yeah, the red fox, almost all the red foxes have a white tip. That's part of their it's a signaling tool. Isn't that amazing? It's a signaling tool, so that in the grass there's a bit of white above to signal to its partner or the kits, the baby fox, when they're going through the grass, to keep an eye on what it's like. The tour guide with the umbrella is the white tip on the red fox. And I'm like, this is amazing. And as I'm looking at the fox, a little hawk flies over. And so all the like kingdom things are here, just affirming. And, you know, I recently had someone that I considered a friend, like these people were saying, oh, she's unstable, like mean things. And this person then responded, yeah, unstable like a fox. And I thought, I actually kind of like foxes. And then maybe this unstable isn't actually unstable. Maybe it's nimble. Maybe that's what it is. It's not unstable. It's moving. It's someone who can pivot, who can find the right angle, who can look at things in the way that if you're solid and just like you're stuck in your story, you can't. That's what it means. Like the whole narrative of the unstable woman, the histrionic woman, like that's so like patriarchal. Why are we still even doing that thing, right? Why are we doing it? Why don't we just respect people's intuition and their feelings, their energies? And yeah, maybe if you're not in alignment with that energy, like you like nicely sort of check in with them or whatever, but you don't dismiss that. Like the unstable is the nimble, it is the fox, it is the trickster, it is the curious and the powerful. And like today, seeing this fox, that was like, Allison, you know, you go out with your apron, your granny apron and your plants, and you're being nimble. You're opening the lines of communication with life itself. And guess what? When you do, when you make a heart on the ground, then the foxes come and they're like, want to play. And it feels good. And that's how we do it. That's how we start to walk out, folks. Follow the fox. Follow the white tail. It's the signal. Hey folks, so I'm at my next spot. I don't know if you can see in the background, it says B Lab. So I'm in a little town, Berwyn, Pennsylvania. It's a little railroad town in the main line. It's Saturday, so there's not really anyone here. And I'm just sitting in the door, and you can see sort of behind me, I've made a little heart here. And I'll show you that a little bit more closely. And then also, I don't know if you can see there, it has the mailboxes which say B Lab and Vision Group and the National Dog Show. So yeah, so we're here at B Lab, co-located with the Exton Dog Show, which I think is amusing. I've come here once before, but I didn't leave a heart that time. And yeah, so why am I here? So the stakeholder capitalism, the new model of the new economy, is based on data, right? And they want the data to create new markets in betting on human behavioral compliance. And they want to use that data as sort of metadata tagged impact tokens to train their AI so that we all have our digital twin cognitive models, and somehow they can attempt to catalyze this omega point noosphere hive mind consciousness thing that they think that they're doing. So, but the finance markets are key elements, and they're part of this cybernetic program of systems. And because money is currency and energy, and so that's all part of that. And so this was set up around 2007, like right around the crash. The largest funders of this entity, essentially what they're doing is they're setting the rules of the game. So the ESG portfolios, the impact investing, all of that, what's grown into the impact management project and the global impact investment network, no one was going to play the game of impact management, betting, derivatives and futures commodities trading and all of these strange things that they're trying to turn into tokenized assets, unless that there was some general agreement about what the games were, what the rules were, what the measures were for tracking the impact, and to set that up. And so what B Lab did was they started to essentially set the rules of the game by saying, well, we will do certifications of companies that meet our standards that say that they're benefit corporations. And the idea of a benefit corporation, it's sort of threading the needle between like a corporation that isn't compelled to do everything for shareholder benefit. So legally, companies are supposed to operate their businesses to increase profits for their shareholders. And so the benefit corporation is actually carved out a space to say that you don't actually have to do everything to benefit your shareholders. You can actually count it as stakeholders. And so it's a different level of legal accountability for the boards if you're a certified benefit corporation. And there are state laws that are in place to do that. And so B Lab was working on getting this model legislation set up in like between 2009 and 2011, and they were doing it with a lot of tech firms and law firms and finance firms in Silicon Valley. So they thought they were going to get it done in California under Arnold Schwarzenegger, but ultimately he vetoed it, and it didn't happen there. But it's been, it was put in place in Delaware, and a number of states have these benefit corporation laws, and now there are like over 5,000 companies around the world that qualify technically, meet the metrics of being a benefit corporation, which means that you can do things that regular companies can't do, and it's all framed around stakeholder capitalism, and this is the new impact economy that they're developing. And again, the impact economy, the story they will tell is that it's to save the world and stop climate catastrophe and solve poverty, and help disadvantaged people throughout the world through humanitarian aid. But actually, it's about running the data economy, getting the infrastructure in place for these data analytics and the impact tokens. So they're there to do this policy infrastructure. And among the largest funders of the organization when it got its start was Rockefeller Foundation, and at the time Judith Rodin, who was the president of Penn, so we're in the greater Penn region, was the head of the Rockefeller Foundation. So they gave like $5 million. And then the other major funder that was also in for $5 million was Prudential Insurance. And so we've talked a lot about parametric insurance and how the insurance companies are going to fit into all of this. So no big surprise. And Prudential has a major presence in New Jersey. And in addition to the parametric insurance stuff we've talked about with Leo, there's also a whole other section that they're working on in microinsurance around digital identity and attestations and claims. So insurance is just, their tentacles are in all of this. But then there were a lot of other foundations. Kellogg was in there, the good old eugenicists who want to fund you for UBI. And then there was also a USAID and the UK Development Aid and the Inter-American Development Bank, because we know they've got their grubby paws all over Latin America. They want all of those kids to code the metaverse, as well as Africa and India. So that's a central feature. And so they've been in the process of credentialing the companies, and then there was something called IRIS, or GIRIS. And Iris is actually the messenger god of the rainbow that would take information from, Earth to the gods in the Greek mythology. And Iris are among the things that are setting the impact metrics. So again, needed for the rules of the game. You need consistency. Like Deutsche Bank and JP Morgan and UPS are not going to play the game unless they realize that there's actually standardized rules for all of it. So when I went back onto Little Sis to revisit, because it's been quite a number of years since I've done this, I noticed that someone named Woody Johnson was also a funder. And he's Johnson of Johnson & Johnson Fortune, and also trustee of the Robert Wood Johnson Foundation. So again, the big pharma is central to the biometric track and trace, the biodigital convergence, that will be put in the game through the ability of them to monitor our biology and where we are in the game and how we're complying with the rules, which are all aligned, all about the Sustainable Development Goals. And so the other thing is there were two co-founders, Andrew Kasoy and Joel Cohen-Gilbert. The latter, Joel Cohen-Gilbert, I think he had a company that was some sort of high-end sneakers and sportswear, and he actually is very interconnected with KIPP, which is the Knowledge is Power Charter School, which technically has ties to Houston, sort of deep ties in the Houston area, but it also, one of the co-founders of KIPP came out of Penn. And so Knowledge is Power Charter School is one of these no excuses schools that's very much about rules, following lots of rules and that sort of thing. Oh, sorry, the sun is in an odd spot. So, and you have to earn a desk, you have to earn your rights to wear a uniform. There's all sorts of token economies. You're supposed to track the teacher, you're supposed to do certain hand signals, and it all feels very much like a setup for cybernetics and robotics. And Martin Seligman, who's also at Penn in the positive psychology program, who's largely funded through military aid, that he was a consultant to KIPP. So yeah, grit, discipline, follow the rules, coordinate, don't think, perform, work hard. It used to, their slogan used to be work hard, be nice. Of course, I'm sure they have impact metrics for the being nice part, but I think they eventually dropped that, and they figured it was actually in bad form to have that saying. But Jay Cohen-Gilbert was that, and I sort of feel like what's coming is this idea that they want to KIPP the world, that they'd like to turn the world into a KIPP charter school where you have to earn your desk, earn your chair, under the constant panopticon of the leaderboard culture. And yeah, that's the thing that they want to take out, and they want to bet on it, and they want to have these global markets bet on it. And there are people who talk about all of this stuff as if it's China or oh, poor BlackRock, that the SEC wants to regulate them for ESG, environmental social governance investing. But no, like BlackRock is asking for this. These investment companies are asking for this because this is the new economy. Like this is what stakeholder capitalism looks like. It looks like, you know, this sort of sad building with the Exton Dog Show, you know, off of the main line of Philadelphia. And I guess in the metaverse, you probably look really super fancy, but, you know, I thought maybe it had been improved since I came here the last time, but it hasn't really. You see the rust off of the railing and, you know, it's not a super fancy digs over here, but I think they have hundreds of employees now, and it's enmeshed. It's enmeshed in mainline philanthropy, mainline finance, and this Penn structure. And Penn, through Wharton, has many, many ties to Silicon Valley. And again, that's where they thought that they were going to get their model legislation done for the benefit corporation law in California, but that didn't happen. But it's online now, and a lot of these, they're supposed to be for public good. Like they're the things that I kind of talk about, like a slight veneer of, you know, shade-grown coffee and fair trade textiles, like atop a giant, vast pit of privatized public welfare services in the Panopticon. Like that's sort of what's coming. And a lot of the charter schools are set up as benefit corporations, and there's, you know, you get a lot of wiggle room. So I'm just gonna flip around and show you the little heart that I made, and then it's kind of late in the day, so I'm gonna head home and get dinner soon. But I'll show you what I left here in terms of communication to life itself. That, hey, signal, like the white tail on the fox, like there's something over here to pay attention to. We could use a little good energy, some rebalancing over here at B Lab on Waterloo Avenue, 15 Waterloo Avenue in Berwyn, Pennsylvania. So again, just in case you didn't see it before, the mailbox, B Lab. It's not super fancy, guys. Like this mailbox fell off, and then this one is the National Show. We're not too far down from the Devon horse country stuff, where I think they used to run around and hunt foxes around here. So those days I think are mostly over. So good thing for the fox that I saw at the garden. Dusty door, sort of plain in here, and then this is the heart that I left. So I still have a celosia from the bouquet that my husband brought home. It's dried, and you can see the little seeds in the base there, the little black seeds, and a dandelion, because what would an intention be without a dandelion offering? And, you know, the fractal pine cone and some acorns down there. And then this is actually, I think these little fruits are from a trumpet vine honeysuckle, which they're quite iridescent and lovely and orange. And I have a bit of the stuff from the fern, and then some lovely grass. That's from Bartram's garden, which is a very nice, airy pattern. And then some boxwood, because these folks are all about empire, and boxwood to me sort of says 18th century gardens, English gardens. So a bit of boxwood in there. And then these are some sort of little flower. Look how pretty they are in there. And I got those out of the meadow over at Stoneleigh. And to me, this is just brightens up this corner. This is just like pops of light and saying, like, draw some attention, bring some light to this darkness, to this dark agenda. And oh, this one little thing over here is, I'm pretty sure that this little guy is connected to like an owl pellet. So I saw I believe that owls have a special thing, like when they eat their prey, and the fur, the things that are not digestible, like the bones and the fur, go into a little sack that they sort of regurgitate up. So it's not actually poop, it comes out their mouth. And when I was at the garden, we used to always be able to order them, and we would have kids dissect the owl pellets and look and see what was inside, which was, I guess, always interesting. I didn't actually do that, my colleague did, but I'm pretty sure that's so maybe some owl wisdom, owl totem in this, and oh, this little curly bit. So we've been talking a lot about physics and linkages and string theory and pretzel theory. So I saw this twisty turny grass in the fountain that they had. And this is some bark that was off of there was a pergola, and it was these peeling logs. So that's the outline, is the pergola, and then just a green background with I think maybe cypress or something that I got today at Stoneleigh. So that's the offering here. May we shed some light on this agenda? Again, looks just like small town Pennsylvania. You wouldn't really, when people are looking for big, scary things out places, I'm like, I don't know. It's like in a little town. Has a dusty door, has kind of a sad mailbox. There's some rust stains over here, you know, like this thing isn't as powerful maybe as we think. So anyway, bye B Lab, bye stakeholder capitalism. Till we meet again.